What's one unsolved mystery you'd like to see solved before you die? Please do like, share, and subscribe. Antimatter. Why is the universe almost entirely matter when equal amounts of matter and antimatter should have annihilated each other? Where is the missing antimatter? Is there a slight difference between matter and antimatter particles that cause matter to last longer? Are there places in the universe primarily made of antimatter instead of matter? Well, outside the observable universe. MH370. I'm sure they'll eventually find the wreckage and have a better idea exactly what happened, but even today, they're still finding old World War II ships and even ships older than that, so I hope that it's found before I leave, because I do wonder what happened to that plane. I hope it's a matter of years or decades and not centuries. I'd like to know what happened to Andrew Gosden. A 14-year-old boy left home in Yorkshire one morning in 2007 dressed in his school uniform and then withdrew all his money from his bank account. He went back home after his parents had gone to work, changed out of his uniform, then went to the train station and bought a one-way ticket to London, about 2 hours away by train. There's a CCTV footage of him leaving King's Cross Station, but that's the last time he was seen. He didn't tell his parents he was planning to go to London, and it's never been established why he went there. I'd love to find out he's actually okay, or even if not, for his parents to finally find out what happened to him. The disappearance of William Tyrrell. Basically, a 3-year-old kid was kidnapped in his front yard after his foster grandma went inside for a glass of water and she heard screaming from the sister, and when she ran out, he was gone. This happens around 2014, and I still remember his face on the news in his Spider-Man costume. The Alps murders, as they're known in the UK. An English family on holiday in France are assassinated with an old pistol with accuracy that points towards a professional hit. A cyclist is found murdered in the same lane by the same person. The assassin thought they had tied up all loose ends, until after 8 hours on the scene, the French police found their 4-year-old daughter hiding under her dead mother's legs. 9 years later, there's still no clue over who or why they were all murdered. I would like John Walsh to be able to find the person who murdered his son, the reason behind Code Adam. Being raised in Florida in the 80s, this story was heard so many times. Now, with what John Walsh has been doing my entire lifetime, and currently with Gabby Petito's case, I think he's more than earned it. I don't remember what the case was called or nicknamed, but it is a missing 411 case. 3 friends were hiking a mountain. They were tied onto a line together. The 2 at the front noticed that the line got significantly lighter out of nowhere, so they pulled the line expecting to be met with the weight of their friend. What they pulled up was now a severed end of rope and no friend in sight. They went back assuming they'd find their friend taking a break or something like that, but he was gone, nowhere to be found. What makes this case really weird is that the particular stretch they were on wasn't particularly steep. It was only slightly inclined, and there were no steep falls nearby, yet he was gone, as if he was picked up and removed from the mountain. The most they ever found of him was his backpack several miles off the path in a cave, which is weird all on its own because there was no plausible way he could have gotten there from where they were on the trail. I think about it at least once a week. What in the hell could have happened to him? Asha Degree. A 9-year-old girl goes missing in the middle of the night on 2/14/2000. Law enforcement is confident her family is not involved. Asha was a well-adjusted kid, played basketball, and had an excellent family support system. Not long after her disappearance, several witnesses believe they saw her walking alongside the highway the night she went missing, in the rain and dead of night. A year and a half later, the backpack she took with her was found buried at a construction site, and it included items that were not hers. Was it a grooming situation and she was abducted? Did she experience an intense sleepwalking episode? No one has seen her since that night. It's heartbreaking. The Springfield 3 is how most folks refer to the 1992 Missouri disappearance of Susie Streeter, 19 years old, her friend Stacy McCall, 18, and Susie's mother, Cheryl Levitt, 47. Susie and Stacy spent the evening at high school graduation parties and ended up at Cheryl and Susie's for the night with the intention of going to a water park the next day with friends to celebrate graduation. The 3 women were never seen again. Their purses, Cheryl's cigarettes, and dog and clothes were found at the house. Friends who came to search for the girls found a broken porch light and obscene voicemail message on the recorder. There are several theories, but nothing proven. Finally, Abby Williams and Libby German were murdered in Delphi, Indiana on 2/13/2017. They spent a day off of school hanging out, were dropping at a popular local hiking trail for a fun couple of hours outside by Libby's older sister, and didn't arrive back at the trailhead for their pickup ride. The next day, the girls' remains were found not far from the trail. There are a lot of things about this case that really stick out. It's well known as Libby was able to get their killer briefly on camera before their tragic murder. They have photo and audio evidence of this man, but have not been able to capture him. They encountered him on the Moon High Bridge, a former train bridge, and a very odd site for an abduction and murder. And finally, Libby's sister Kelsey sticks out to me as an example of an incredible sister. She works so hard to get information out about the case. She's studying to enter LE/justice system, and she puts in so much effort to keep her sister and Abby's memories alive. A girl from my hometown, Tupelo, Mississippi, disappeared under suspicious circumstances. Blood and hair found, glasses left behind, etc., on a school day when we were both about 12 years old. I'm 39 now. Her name is Lee Ochi. Her body was never found. She used to come to school with obvious signs of physical abuse. No one was ever charged. It still breaks my heart. I need to know what happened. The disappearance and murders of 80+ indigenous women along the Highway of Tears in northern BC. This began in 1970 and continues to this day. It seems plausible that there's a serial killer operating up there. Unfortunately, the RCMP didn't even start looking into this until 1998. It's disgusting how indigenous people are treated here. What happened to my friend years ago? I met this person online a few years back. We became very close and even had the same birthday. This was back in the time where Skype was still somewhat usable and definitely before the Discord age. There was a night where we were playing a game and just chilling in a call. She said BRB, and she never came back after that. For 5 days following, she stayed in the Skype call muted, and her character was online, a game we played together those whole 5 days. After the 5th day, everything suddenly dropped, and she was offline until this very day. I hope she's okay. If she was playing a prank to get away from us permanently, that was one hell of a prank. My sister ran away from our family when we was only 10. I only figured after weeks that she would not return for a while. My parents are generally strict, but I never saw her being physically abused. She just did not like our culture. I was told by her and my parents for years that she was studying art in a different city now and would return. I had some contact with her still, and we talked occasionally on eBuddy for 2 years, but I lost my email that I used for it. After years, I realized she would not return. I confronted my parents and my older brothers, and in short, nobody knows where she is. Even my cousin, whom she was very, very close with and who is a trustworthy person, did not know. She got help from an official support aid here in Germany. It has been 13 years now, and I just would like to know how she is and has been. Kind of an odd one. I can't even remember the name anymore. I think maybe Disney's Discovery Islands. And no, this doesn't have to do with the creepypasta, although I think it's funny. If memory serves correctly, nobody quite knows why Discovery Islands was kind of abandoned, but I think people theorized it had to do with them not being able to protect the animals they had there from, like, wildlife. I'm not even necessarily curious, like, why they shut it down as much as I remember hearing from people that snuck onto the island like years, a decade even after it closed, and they were still running power to the lights. Why? I don't quite know why Disney interests me so much, but there is kind of an eerie aura around the idea that there's an abandoned park that they probably still pay property tax on. Spooky. There are a few. There was one kid that went missing on the night of a party. He was found near a yellow sock, I think. He was dead. People swore they already searched that way. There was another kid a few days later, dead with a yellow sock near them. I just really want to know if the yellow sock was a coincidence. There was another one where 3 people were in a car in a snowstorm. 2 left to get help. They died. People came and saved the 3rd person. They searched all over for the couple. In the spring, they found them like 10 feet from the car in an area they'd already searched. To add a weird thing to it, they didn't have any shoes, and their shoes were nowhere to be seen. If you had asked me several years ago, mine would have been Jacob Wetterling. I grew up maybe an hour and a half away. That case dominated my entire life. No more kids allowed out after dark. No going to friends' houses, parents chaperoned outside at all times, no bike riding outside of the driveway, and absolutely never leaving the street we lived on without a parent. Every single kid in the neighborhood had at least 2 adults with on Halloween. Each kid had a flashlight. We lived near a gas station, and every car my mom didn't recognize was suddenly the guy who stole Jacob. Since I'm the unique state of having my one case having been solved, I can tell you how it feels. There was no relief, really. It was just shock and then anger. Now I just feel cold and robbed. The case had been so easily solvable. It was all police blunder, and I have a hunch machismo, which destroyed people's lives with false accusations. It allowed the perpetrator to continue to attack and have more potential victims and get away with prior ones. I was born about 10 years after he was killed and declared missing. My parents and my friends' parents were all in college or in high school when it started. So, at the time, that fear was for their younger siblings, the kids they babysat. As the years went by, the case ate them up, and that fear transferred to their own kids. So many people I know who are my parents' age refuse to believe the police did anything wrong. They've convinced themselves that it was just a tough case, a special kind of monster, so they can justify the scare tactics that used on the kids out of fear of this kidnapping boogeyman. Sorry that it's a bit of the question. This will probably be buried, and I don't remember specifics, but there was a man that was exposing his local police department for corruption, and then he wound up dead from an apparent suicide. His death was so strange, though, that he couldn't have possibly killed himself. I believed he was stabbed in his back or something along those lines, and then his house was burned down. What's weird is that he knew the police were watching him, but people thought he was mentally ill. The department used heat sensors to know whether he was home or not, and he consistently caught the same car on camera, surveying his home, along with people stopping to take pictures and videos of his home. Then boom, dead by suicide. I want to know what happened to Rembrandt's Storm of the Sea of Galilee. It was stolen in Boston in the early 1990s, and the FBI supposedly knows who did it, but its current whereabouts are still unknown, AFAIK. I've been fortunate enough to have seen a lot of art and been to a lot of museums. Even though I've only seen reproductions, this painting hits me right in the feels for some reason, and I'm not even that big into Rembrandt or the Dutch Golden Age. And maybe reproductions are fine for some paintings, but this original work was 5 foot 2 inches in height and about 4 feet wide, and I want to stand in front of it so badly. Also, this is Rembrandt, and I have a sneaking suspicion that the colors and the play with light and shadow aren't conveyed as powerfully in the reproductions as in the original. For instance, Van Gogh reproductions are very cool and all, but they fall far, far short of the texture and colors of the original. I know art gets stolen a lot, and they don't normally make me actually sad, but this one really does. I hope it wasn't destroyed. If it's ever recovered, I will definitely fly to wherever it's put on display first. They kept the empty frame from which it was stolen. Brutal. I would like to know what happened to my friend Antonio. He was from Mexico, but his family lived here in Houston. He got heavily into cocaine before choosing to go to rehab back home in Mexico. He enrolled in a small rehab and was doing great. However, he got into a fistfight with a narco's son in rehab, and no one has heard from him since. Antonio, it's been 6 years, and I think of your smile all the time. Atlantis. When I was in 10th grade, I convinced my history teacher to let me choose Atlantis for my project, arguing that because Plato had discussed it, whether allegorical or not, that was still technically history. I got an A+ on the actual paper. Now, on to the good stuff. Plato has these dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, around c. 360 BC, and used them to posit various allegorical conjectures on the philosophical workings of the human psyche. He used multiple characters and familiar philosopher inserts to talk about the hubris of man, and using the Socratic method. Critias heard about Atlantis from his grandfather, who heard it from his grandfather, who heard it from his grandfather, so on and so forth, from Solon to the family of Dropides, all the way down to Critias, and then retold through Plato, or so we're led to believe. Suspension of disbelief and all. One side argues that Athens is the ideal state. In contrast, the other side argues that this other seafaring nation from antiquated history and anecdotal stories is the antithesis of all of that. Of course, these ancient civilizations had to go and fight about it. Eventually, through this conflict between them, the gods strike them down, and Atlantis is swallowed up by the ocean. Unfortunately, there is very little actual information about Atlantis because the only known mentions are in these two monologues, or references to people mentioned in them. They go into great detail to describe what it looks like, of course. They define its grandeur and its sophistication. They give us a pretty good idea of where they think it is, and scholars and archaeologists have looked and looked and looked. There are many theories too. Sicily, Crete, Cyprus, Minos, even North America, etc. OMG, so many theories. Many people believe they are just allegories. Some people believe there is some fact behind these stories, and many parables are also based, at least a little, on stories we've heard about actual events. For example, Plato could very well have based these stories on information heard from Solon, a Greek legislator who had previously heard about Atlantis while traveling in Egypt, and Crantor, another philosopher and student of Xenocrates, who was one of Plato's own students, claimed it was entirely fact as well. However, Crantor's own works on the subject are lost, and all we have is what other people have then referenced about Crantor's opinions and observations on the matter secondhand by yet another philosopher centuries later. Still, the story is that Solon visited a temple in the ancient Egyptian city of Sais 200 years before Plato wrote Timaeus, and the priest there supposedly shared with him the story of Atlantis and the war that waged between them and Greece, as well as the god-punishing earthquakes that swallowed it up. And maybe, if we can find this temple to the ancient Egyptian deity Neith, we can find some hieroglyphics about Atlantis, too. Is it real? Dunno. Is it interesting? Well, it is to me. This is the narrator speaking. Jeffrey Epstein's suicide? Come on. Let's go. Solve it.